everybody. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I know we're seeing a bunch of people trickle in, but you guys are used to my spiel by now. So I'll go ahead and get started while we let some others hop on here tonight. First of all, welcome. Thanks so much for being here with us. Very excited to have you. Here at CASR, we strive to support a 100% renewable Colorado through engagement, education, and connections and networking opportunities across all Denver communities. Speaking of networking, we are thinking about restarting our in-person events later this year, so we would love to hear from you. Please send us messages. You can do it via chat or questions here tonight, or email us offline to talk to us about your comfort level with this. We are certainly interested in hearing from you guys about that, and would love to see all of you in person and really establish that networking component of CASR again. So our values here at CASR are renewables, emerging technologies, efficiency, diversity, inclusion, and community. We are just one of 5 chapters throughout the state here at the Denver chapter. We've got chapters across the board, and all of us are nonpartisan, nonprofit, 501c3 membership organization. So tonight, I'll go through a few announcements. You can see David here on the screen. He's part of our policy guru team, so he'll go through some of his announcements on the policy side. Then we will introduce not one, but 2 fantastic speakers for you in our panel. And then we'll turn it over to them to talk about all the great things Denver's doing in our parks to make us more sustainable. If you'd like to learn more about CASR or to become a member, I can't cover everything we do here tonight in my announcement. So please feel free to visit us at www.cres-energy.org. And like I said, we do want to hear your feedback. Would love to hear about in-person events. Would love to hear about topics or speakers that you might be interested in hearing from in the future. You can always email us at mdcres@cres-energy.org to share your thoughts, or like I said, just type to us here tonight. And we are a volunteer-based charity, so anything you can do to support CASR is always appreciated. You can donate online, you can Venmo us, or while you're doing your shopping, you can change your charity of choice on Amazon Smile to donate to CASR every time you get something sent by Amazon to your home. And very exciting, my favorite month, it's Earth Month. Tomorrow is actually Earth Day. We encourage you to do things for Earth Day. Attending this webinar is a great thing to do for Earth Day to celebrate Earth. Dem Parks is going to talk to you all about the fantastic stuff they're doing to celebrate Earth Day every day. If you'd like to help clean up a park or another area, I'm sure the parks crews would appreciate that. Bring your little trash picker-uppers and get out there. Make sure to sort your recyclables from your non-recyclable waste. You can plant pollinator-friendly plants in your garden or your yard. Use your dishwasher instead of hand washing. That actually saves a bunch of water. Upgrade to LED light bulbs. That will save you on your energy bills, which I know we're all feeling right now as prices have increased. Go plant-based in your diet, even if it's just 1 or 2 meals more than you normally do. Or bike instead of drive, especially while the weather's so beautiful. So hopefully you'll do something today or change a habit over the long term to celebrate Earth Day. And with that, David, I'll turn it over to you for your policy update.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. Just briefly hitting a few kind of high points here. At the national level, the Commerce Department is considering putting a new tariff in place essentially for some Southeast Asia countries who are kind of connected with China and building panels. The idea here was, at least theoretically, gee, we're trying to tariff Chinese products, but these other products are actually made in these other countries. The long story short, this will affect 80% or more of the panels that are installed in the U.S. So you can imagine if we, double the price of, the materials here, that could literally just pause the entire solar installation process here in the country. So this is a big deal. If the U.S. had more suppliers, this wouldn't be a big deal, but we don't yet have that. We're working to get more suppliers, but we're not there yet. So we're watching this very, very carefully. There it is, hot dog. And a little closer to home in Colorado, there is a lot of debate, much of it quite energetic, as you might imagine, over our Colorado's last, I believe this is our last coal-fired plant, Comanche 3. Xcel wanted to keep it running like quite a while, 2040. Anyway, they've been pushed back upon, so the fight is on right now to try to convince Xcel, find a way to shut down that plant sooner than later because of all the greenhouse gas, output from it. This is not a simple problem, as you might imagine. Essentially what that means, if they shut it on earlier, Xcel is going to probably want to raise our rates, right, to help pay for it, because it's a bazillion-dollar plant and someone's got to pay for it. But anyway, this is right now a big topic. Keep going. And getting even closer to home, I'm very excited about this. City of Denver is announcing a new program, the Climate Action Rebates, tomorrow. That is on Earth Day. They've got a fairly substantial pot of money to help people who are doing electrification, like us. We're going to start the process of electrifying our house that was built in 1885 here in 5 Points. Substantial potential refunds on this for putting in a heat pump, replacing your gas-fired furnace, heat pump water heaters, things of this sort. Anyway, it's very exciting. It's the starting gun is firing tomorrow. And I believe we're going to hear a bit more from our very own Johnny Rogers about this later. So thanks, Lindsay.
Oh, sorry, there we go, off mute. Thanks so much, I really appreciate it. Exciting news here at home in Denver, kind of helping to ease the hurt of some of the news about the solar tariffs that you shared with us at the beginning of your update. So definitely we'll be keeping an eye on that, and we will be keeping this crew at CRES updated on how things progress on that front. So please be sure to join us for our policy update, as well as a fantastic speaker next month in May. On Thursday, May 19th at 7 p.m., we'll be hearing from Geraldine Link. She's going to talk about climate change and the ski industry. So I know ski season's slowing down here in Colorado, although I believe A-Basin will still be open on May 19th. So it's always a little bit topical here, but she's going to give an update on what different ski resorts, as well as the National Ski Areas Association, are doing to move the needle on climate solutions. So she's going to talk about their three-pillared policy for action, advocacy, and resilience, so we can protect our winters and continue to ski for many seasons to come is the goal. So without further ado, though, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I'm very, very excited to introduce our speakers for tonight. We are going to be hearing from Colton Rohloff, who is of Denver Parks, and Jonathan Rogers, also known as Johnny to many of you here at CRES, from the City of Denver's Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency team, about efforts to beautify Denver, increase resilience, and make this a sustainable city for us all. So feel free to turn on your cameras, Colton and Johnny, and I will pass over the ball to make you guys presenter.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lindsay, and hi, everyone. It's fantastic to be here. Really excited to be sharing the stage with Colton tonight and telling you all about some of the things we're doing in Denver. All right, I'll start. Me first, Jonathan Rogers. Call me Johnny. I'm the Renewable Energy Specialist in Denver's Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency. There's me and my family. We've got a funny little dog who fits really well in a tent. Love being outside. That's part of why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. I want to protect this planet for my kids, their grandkids, keep on being able to get out there and do the things that I love. You know, started my career growing algae in a lab and trying to extract the oils to make biofuels. While technically you can do it, I think there are better things that, you know, we can use that algae oil for as we look at things like electric vehicles are likely a better alternative. But doing that type of analysis got me really inspired and thinking about, you know, what are the climate solutions that are out there? What are the ones that we can really scale up to address this global crisis that we're in? And fortunately found myself in a position with Denver where I helped to implement our strategy on how we're going to reach our decarbonization goals. So to give you a sense of the climate office and how we're structured, you know, we've got a lot of different complementary things that we need to do to reach our goals. My part of the world is down in this corner, energy policy and renewables. But as you'll see, you know, our systems are becoming more and more interconnected. As more electric vehicles come onto the road and plug into the electric grid, you know, that creates a new opportunity as well as a new, you know, challenge that we need to manage. Same thing with electric buildings and homes and things like heat pumps, and, you know, the equipment that we're installing can be controlled in new ways that provide system benefits so that we can, you know, manage the grid effectively without creating, you know, power outages, rolling blackouts, while also having those carbon benefits of keeping us off of fossil fuel resources. But of course, you know, all of this connects back to, well, what are we doing with our natural environment and being, you know, good stewards of the resources that we have. Looking forward to Colton's slides later on, where he's talking about some of the great work that Parks is already doing in this regard. And of course, creating opportunities for our businesses and our residents to really participate in Denver's energy transition. So we're very fortunate, you know, we're on a positive trajectory, but we still have a big gap to reach our goals. For our municipal facilities, you know, we're hoping to be powered by 100% renewable electricity by 2025, and then across the entire community, 100% by 2030. Now, the law effectively has locked this into place, putting us on this trajectory to be an 80% carbon reduction by 2030. And the plan that David was talking about earlier, right now it's looking like that'll push us even higher, up to 87%, and hopefully even more as those deliberations continue on what the future of our electric system can really look like. So our energy programs, you know, we need to figure out how are we going to contribute to decarbonizing that electricity supply as quickly as possible. But also, you know, our office was established with a mission where we really need to maximize investments in under-resourced and vulnerable communities. There are a lot of communities out there that, you know, their homes have been sited next to industrial plants or power plants. They've really borne the brunt of environmental pollution. You know, we have different maps of Denver that show, you know, where is our tree canopy, where are urban heat islands, where are, you know, people exposed to flood risk. And typically you tend to see those things cluster, where our folks who are, you know, struggling to pay their bills or, you know, have the lowest incomes are also subjected to some of the highest levels of environmental pollution and climate risk. So we need to be trying to balance these two things as much as possible. Now, I like to keep in mind that, you know, while I think about climate change as, you know, an existential risk that can affect humanity or my kids and their kids, there are a lot of people in our community who have a much more immediate existential risk of how are they going to pay, you know, their rent that month, or can they make their utility bill payments, or do they have a convenient way to get to work and, you know, put food on the table for their families. So if we're not thinking about our solutions in terms of community solutions and solving those immediate risks and challenges that people are facing, we're not going to be successful. So we want to solve community problems in ways that really help to mitigate and reduce our climate impact simultaneously. So part of how we do that is through this complementary suite of community programs. And we're very fortunate in November 2020, our taxpayers passed a 0.25% sales tax increase, to be specifically dedicated to climate action. Now, this fund creates about $40 million a year that can be used for 6 allowable uses. That's renewables, buildings, transportation electrification, green workforce development, natural resources, and can't remember the 6th right now. That is extremely embarrassing. Environmental justice and environmental justice. There we go. So these programs recognize, we have a bunch of different people out there. We have different organizations. We need something for everybody to be able to participate in. Things for renters, things for homeowners, nonprofits, small businesses. And this really complements our advocacy, which can help to create the systemic changes that we need to see in the overall energy system. The gigawatt scale capacity that comes online when you shut down a coal plant. But these programs can be much more, targeted, kind of methodical, smaller scale installations that can help with an individual more directly. Our community solar program, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a few slides, great partnership with Denver Parks and Rec, as well as a number of other partners to host solar at municipal and government property, where we can actually share that power between the host site. They get their needs met, and then we actually donate some of that power back to low-income households in the community. As these projects get built, because they're on city property, we can create job training opportunities. We can co-locate with things like electric vehicle chargers and address other community needs, such as providing shade and covered parking in places where we might just have a big blacktop that heats up. Our solar co-op is a group purchase program. So anyone can sign up for this program. The idea being, if you get 100 or 150 people to sign up and ask a local solar installer, hey, we're all interested in solar, can you give us a discount? We found the answer is yes, and you'll typically see 10 to 15% off the cost of a solar install. And to help supplement that, we've put aside some funding to help income qualified households save up to $8,000 on that installation, and then obtain low interest financing from the Colorado Clean Energy Fund to help cover any remainder. Our climate action rebate program, I've got a slide coming up to get into the details of that, but again, we need every household to be able to participate in electrifying their homes, purchasing an e-bike, figuring out ways, how do you lower your carbon footprint while maintaining, that comfort for your family and in our changing climate. Our Renewables and Resilience Incentive Program provides incentive dollars for nonprofits in Denver that provide critical services to their community. So we're thinking about places like food pantries and emergency shelters and medical clinics that, you really want the lights to stay on in that location because they're providing this critical service to their community. Well, we can help them do that by investing in solar and battery storage and EV charging. And we're starting to identify technologies where we can actually do vehicle to building EV charging to take the power from vehicles parked in their parking lot to help keep the lights on in those facilities. And not only that, but the solar helps them lower their utility bills, which they can then reinvest into the services that they're providing. And last but not least, our Solar Schools program. This is a pretty diverse partnership with Denver Public Schools and other local public education institutions, really trying to think about, how can we inspire that next generation of climate leaders? How do we create hands-on opportunities in the classroom for kids to learn about clean energy? How do we create environments in which they can learn more productively? And Denver Public Schools has received a few $1 million in this past year in COVID relief funds, specifically to build outdoor classrooms. Think of that as like a shaded amphitheater. Now we're partnering with them where they can apply to the city for funding and use that to incorporate solar into those shade structures, looking at some bifacial solar designs. So kids will be sitting in these outdoor amphitheaters, shaded from the sun, looking up and seeing these panels hard at work that are sending power back to their school, helping to lower their school's utility bills and making the connection that much more tangible for the students. So now diving in, community solar, really putting the community into community solar. So as I mentioned, we share that power between our host facilities and low-income households in the community, and really strengthening that Denver Public Schools partnership. They have their Family and Community Engagement Office, which is a great help resource for families in need. Now, every year they have about 1,000 families that approach them that have fallen behind on their utility bills and may be at risk of being disconnected from their energy service. Well, when those families are identified, we'll be able to sign them up to receive power from the projects that we're building and hosting on city property to help them avoid that, catastrophic situation so that they can keep the lights on. Our first 10 projects in our portfolio should be able to help over 200 homes, maybe even close to 250, depending on the needs of each family and how much power will go to each one, as well as 10 different properties controlled by the Denver Housing Authority, helping with their residents as well. Our next set of projects will effectively double that number, actually covering up to 400 more families. So we'll be hitting 600 ideally by the end of next year if we can stay on our construction schedules and get these projects built. That partnership with Denver Public Schools, you can see a image here of 2 students at Northeast Early College in Montbello. We've been hosting solar installation basics training and various classroom activities for the students, and Northeast Early College will actually be a host site for one of our first 10 projects, a solar carport in that high school parking lot. And we're getting ready to submit another application to Excel Energy to hopefully bring this program to more high schools around the city. I touched on these other items already, but job training programs and really trying to bring people into the workforce. And through all of these connections that we make, we want to bring people to our other programs or other resources that are already out there where they can get energy efficiency audits, new appliances, or various other forms of assistance to help them with their bills. Here's just a snapshot of where our first 10 projects are going in phase 1 of the community solar program, and some of the notes about what this design will look like. These will go in effectively where 2 vehicles park, nose to nose. You put a canopy span above that. They both get covered by by that shade structure. It's a great way to keep those cars cool, protected from the elements. Doesn't impact or take away any green space in any parks or any high school. Doesn't impact the site at all. And in fact, I think we are hopefully enhancing the experience for any of those park users or teachers or students, and can start co-locating with EV charging so that folks can take advantage or start to feel more comfortable with making that transition. That dual tilt model will help to mitigate some snow and ice in some of our projects, such as our municipal facility, the DOTI complex, Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. We're trying out a single tilt design with some snow guards, and we'll really learn through this, what's the optimal configuration to allow for emergency vehicle access and snow mitigation, and making sure that we can really maintain these projects to the best of our ability. And then the very exciting phase 2 of the community solar program is our integrated solar and farming demonstration project, an agrivoltaic system in partnership with the Denver Botanic Gardens Chatfield Farms and the National Renewable Energy Lab. So that's a 1 megawatt project. It's a 4-acre farm down at that site. 80% of that power we're going to be able to donate back to low-income families in Denver, and the 20% of power that goes back to the Botanic Gardens covers 100% of their energy use on an annual basis. Now, NREL is the kind of worldwide leader in agrivoltaic research, so we're really lucky to have them nearby and as a partner on this. They found that having this intermittent shading from the panels is actually helping to reduce the stress on crops that maybe historically have grown well in Colorado, but with our changing climate, with more less water, more arid conditions, higher temperatures, there's a lot of stress out there. So the panels are actually helping to keep more moisture in the ground and are actually improving crop yields for certain crops. I believe that Denver Botanic Gardens is partnering with some other nonprofits on the food production to donate that food to local food banks. So we're really excited to demonstrate this as a sort of intersection of energy, water, and food security. And Botanic Gardens gets about 200,000 visitors a year down at that site. So it'll be a great showcase for public engagement and education. Climate action rebates, something that you guys can take advantage of starting tomorrow. There's kind of two categories. One, e-bikes, they stand alone. You'll be able to apply on our website, denvergov.org/ebike, and get a $400 voucher emailed to you, which you'll bring into a participating bike shop and be able to take that straight off the purchase price of a new e-bike. For income qualified residents, you can upload some proof of your income qualifications. You can actually qualify for up to $1,200 off. For all of these other rebates, it's really thinking about, how do we mitigate our largest sources of carbon emissions in Denver? Now, 97% of our natural gas use comes from space and water heating. So we're really leading in a big way with trying to electrify those systems using high efficiency heat pumps. So heat pumps can, it's a bit of a misnomer. You might think, okay, that can only replace my furnace, but heat pumps are cool. What they do is they move heat from one place to another. So in the winter, they actually take in some cold air, pull some heat off of it, send colder air back outside, and they move that heat into your home, keeping you warm. Where in the summer, they actually pull the heat out of your house, keeping you cool. And so in the summer, you can cover all of your cooling needs, and in the winter, it can cut your natural gas consumption and energy use substantially. Heat pump water heaters as well, we have rebates for, and smart water heaters, which can connect to the grid and make sure that you're not going to be heating up your water during the highest demand times on the system. We'll provide a higher rebate for that, and Xcel will actually pay you an ongoing amount for participating in their program on an annual basis. For those early adopters that are interested in heat pump technology, you can also qualify for a solar and battery storage rebate. Your natural gas use will go down, but your electricity use inherently will go up because you weren't using that technology earlier. That solar install can help to keep your bills lower. And we want to effectively say thank you for being an early adopter. And all of this stuff, it might impact your electrical service where you need to go from a 100 amp to a 150 or 200 amp panel. We have rebates there that can help with that upgrade as well. Now, all of these numbers you see here, that's open to the general public. Act fast, because depending on how quickly things get taken up, we may have to ratchet down over time to make sure that we're making the most of our budget. And for income qualified households, we'll actually cover up to 100% of the cost of installing all of these items. That'll be exclusively through our provider Energy Resource Center. They can connect you to additional wraparound services such as insulation and other weatherization approaches. And we'll make sure through that partnership that people are getting all of the things that they need for their home. And I'll stop here. I'm seeing a couple questions in the chat that I'll jump in real quick. So from Martin, is there a mechanism that prevents heat pump or solar installers to jack up their prices? Unfortunately, no. We have no control over that. It's a private market, and those providers can choose to, they can name a price whatever they want, the same way they do right now. However, it's up to everyone as a consumer to decide, what is an appropriate price. And our intent is that through transparency and being able to show, here's what the average total installed cost is of all of these different technologies, potentially even showing that by the different contractors that register for our program, you will be able to make an informed decision as a consumer and see, this company might be trying to jack up their prices to take advantage of some extra profit margin, while others recognize that they want to stay competitive and offer the best deal that they can, and really pass along all of these savings to the consumer. So our hope is that the market forces will do what they are supposed to do, and that transparency will help people to make the best possible decision. And I also, that reminded me of this clarifying point. All of these rebates will be provided to the customer as a discount at the time of purchase. So, right now, most rebate programs, you still have to pay for everything out of pocket, and then you fill out some paperwork, you put it in the mail 6 weeks later, you might get a check. Asking someone to, shell out $9,000 for a heat pump install, they might not have that money in their bank account. So even if we're promising it on the back end, that's not a commitment that a lot of people can make. So these are really intended to help overcome that equity gap, where folks can take advantage of the program as that upfront discounted price, which can hopefully get more people into the program. I see A.E. Garrett. Are contractors available with experience installing cold climate heat pumps? How do we find them? Cold climate heat pumps have to be sized and installed correctly, or else they'll continue to have a bad rep. Yes, so you should be able to go to our website, denvergov.org/homeenergy, and find a list of qualified contractors. Right now, we're limited to just sending you off to the list that Excel uses. We want to have as much alignment there as possible. But as contractors actually submit rebate applications back to the city, we'll know what pieces of equipment they're installing. We'll be able to show our list of, here are the providers that are doing the most installs in Denver, which will probably give you a sense of, if they're doing the most, they probably know what they're doing. And we're going to be auditing a select number of those projects to make sure that everything is going smoothly. And, we're not going to recommend someone, or we're going to kick someone out of the program if, they're not following the rules. We'll be providing best practices with our contractors to make sure that they're doing quality installations. And part of the rationale of aligning our approved contractor list with those approved by Xcel Energy is that it provides additional oversight, additional regulation through the Public Utilities Commission to make sure that those contractors are doing a good job and are not taking advantage of customers in any way. And then the last question, and then I'm going to move on in the interest of time, from Bruce. Could you explain how this program will dovetail with insulation, ceiling, and window replacements? So for our income qualified program, all of that is effectively included. That's the package that Energy Resource Center can provide, but they get a lot more money from state weatherization assistance programs, from federal grants, and from Denver's franchise fee, which you'll see on your utility bills is about a 2% or 5% fee that everybody pays. $2 million of that is annually sent to nonprofits in Denver that help with low-income weatherization assistance services. We're going to be encouraging everybody to be thinking about efficiency and making sure that they're improving their home envelope in addition to installing these appliances, and not just counting on who cares how much energy I consume if I put solar panels on my roof. But it really is critical right now that we start making heat pump technology more prevalent. Only 5% of the rebates issued last year by Xcel Energy were heat pumps compared to the traditional natural gas or air conditioning units. So that's something that we need to turn upside down. And a big part of that comes with sending a message to the contractors and the equipment manufacturers that, we want to see you installing heat pumps. This is what you should be keeping on the truck or in your warehouse for homes to take advantage of. I had the experience this past winter where my furnace broke, and it's, early January, and the contractor comes out, and it's either, we can do a heat pump in 3 months and it's going to cost 3 times the price of the furnace, or we can have a furnace in the next day. And, we have to stay warm through the winter, so we went with a high efficiency model, but that's the reality of the situation. And if me as, the climate guy for the city couldn't practically install a heat pump in my home when I needed it, the market's broken. And so this is a big part of what we're trying to fix. I'm going to speed up here because we got to get to Colton and then the rest of the discussion. Just all this to say, natural gas and transportation are accounting for a larger and larger share of Denver's emissions as the grid gets cleaner. That's why it's going to be so important for us to address these all of these issues holistically. And as they electrify, that's where we have some real opportunities to enable more resilient grid operations. When we think about, how are these rebates going to be distributed? A big concern that people have is, is this going to be just scooped up by the wealthiest homes in Denver? Now, if you look at this map, that's kind of reflective of it. This is very reminiscent of a income distribution in Denver, with the darker purple being the more affluent areas. So this is representative of the percentage of households in each neighborhood that subscribe and pay a premium for Xcel Energy's electricity, renewable energy products, things like wind source. So it's no surprise the folks that have more are willing to pay more for that clean energy. Now, as our rebates get distributed, we want to make sure that the map is more equitably colored throughout, and where we see those gaps of why isn't this neighborhood taking advantage of the program, we'll be able to target them, form partnerships with community organizations, really help get the word out, or make adjustments as needed to ensure that we're emphasizing those climate vulnerable and under-resourced neighborhoods so that they receive the benefit that they disproportionately need. Second to last slide here, just a snapshot of where are our projects starting to go in around Denver. I'm really excited to see this map filling out. Some of these are proposed, some of these are more underway than others, but over time we want to be adding more projects, more partnerships, and at some point we hope to have a interactive version of the map up on our website where people can learn about all of the different work that we're doing and how we're really trying to share the social, economic, and environmental benefits of clean energy across Denver. Last thing, so our vision, we need this complementary suite of programs. It's going to advance our decarbonization goals while also balancing those benefits for members of the community. And when we measure impact, we want to ask ourselves and have good answers to these questions. Are we driving down greenhouse gas emissions? Are we addressing climate vulnerabilities? Are we being innovative and coming up with solutions that can be really scaled, not just in Denver, but in other cities, other states, other countries, to really maximize our impact? And equity is multifaceted. We want to help people lower their energy costs, but we also want to create economic opportunity, job opportunities, business opportunities. We want to, recognize that these investments also help with public health. Getting natural gas out of homes can have great indoor air quality benefits. And thinking about the heat stress and the vulnerability that can put on people, all of this stuff is intersectional, and everything that we do needs to have the community involved, not just as the beneficiary on the back end, but in the conversations as we design programs and then implement them, so that we understand, what are the challenges that different communities face, what are their priorities, and then, as I mentioned at the start of my presentation, we can solve community problems with climate solutions. So thanks a ton. I'm going to hand it over to Colton, and then we will look forward to a great discussion.
Thanks, Johnny. Hi, I'm Colton Rohloff, and I'm the Assistant Director of Capital Finance and Analytics for Denver Parks and Recreation. And just a little bit of what that means is that we get about a $50 million a year capital budget. And so part of my job is to use data and all sorts of techniques to figure out how can we efficiently invest in our system, how can we use existing, market processes as well as business analytics to figure out what's our best return on investment, how do we get more people in the parks, how do we service historically underserved areas, which is a big focus of ours, trying to right historical wrongs. But as we've moved more into the future now, a lot of our resources are actually going to sustainability, making sure that our park system is resilient to climate change. Unfortunately, some impact is inevitable. Some of it we're already seeing now, and also focusing on making sure that we're leading with CASR's leadership as well on how do we be kind of a good role model for focusing towards the future, especially on the energy front, but also water usage. We have the honor of being Denver Water's biggest customer, and we're talking hundreds and hundreds of millions of gallons. We maintain all of the right-of-ways. Any public green space you see is maintained and irrigated on us. Almost all of the urban forest in Denver on public property is maintained by us, irrigated by us, everything. So the green infrastructure part of the city has a lot to do with parks and recreation. And so we have a pretty heavy reach, and we're a pretty big organization, I think bigger than most people know. And so I want to kind of talk through a little bit of everything we do, but I want to focus on two main tiers. I'll go pretty fast because parks is an unlimited rabbit hole, and I want to have time for discussion on any questions you guys have about what we're doing from a resiliency and sustainability standpoint, but also just parks in general, and just kind of see where the conversation leads us. So Johnny, could you, next slide. So the first thing I want to talk about is we are building a new maintenance shop in on Smith Road. This will be Denver's first net zero municipal building. So this will be built from the ground up as a net zero building. So this is a great partnership with the Climate Change Office. We want to make sure, and it's going to serve as a pilot for all the maintenance shops we're building in the future. We picked up a lot of maintenance shops on the last RISE bond, which the voters approved. So we want to make sure that now that we're going to be replacing a lot of our maintenance shops that were built in the 60s and haven't been touched since, are now this net zero, future looking, future compatible system. So we can be leaders in this field and show that like Parks is committed, even in a non-public building, to making sure that our water use, energy use, everything is net zero across the board. Next slide, Johnny. The other pilot we have going now is Barnum Recreation Center. Oh, sorry. Go back. Yeah, Barnum Recreation Center. This building has the oldest HVAC system in almost the entire city. It's so old that the community college used to come and do HVAC classes there because there's stuff in there that hasn't been seen since like the Reagan administration. So this is our first pilot with CASR as well to completely convert this building to fully electrified. So we want to kind of try the most challenging centers first, because that's going to give us a lot of information going forward on costs and effective technologies to get some of our newer rec centers, which won't be as big of a task, down the road towards full electrification and lowering their greenhouse gas emissions. There's a couple of challenging things I want to just talk about generally when you're talking about buildings this size and this old. One is, heat pumps, and the technology is there to do the big open space, is the gyms, that kind of thing. The real challenge is the pools. And this isn't, we've been exploring some opportunities there with some new technologies on how to efficiently heat pools with electricity, which is, for a lot of reasons, very complicated. Obviously, these pools serve as a very important water equity resource for these underserved neighborhoods. So it's important that we keep them operating. As summers get hotter and people don't all have air conditioning, pools, especially for our lower income citizens, prove as important relief for them. And a big part of keeping them operational when this dry climate has huge temperature swings between night and day is a heating system. So even if the pool is outside, it's important that we at least have some control over the water temperature. So we're going to be exploring these opportunities at Barnum. And then as we kind of settle on a solution for an outdoor pool, we're going to move towards the indoor pools, which is even harder for a lot of reasons, but we can get into that more in depth if that comes up. Right now, just to show you at the bottom of the slide here, this is a 224 kilowatt hour per square foot building, which is, considering it doesn't have an auditorium, is really high. So that's why Barnum is our first swing at this, and we're hoping that not only can we lead in this front, but we can actually kind of figure out some solutions that we can pass on to other municipalities, because everyone we have talked to on the city side from our sister cities has had an impossible time figuring this out. So now that we're resourced to do so, we're committed to make this happen. The next slide, Johnny. So these are kind of the guiding tenets of the parks. This is become the park's game plan. Some of these are traditional park, duties, recreational programming, 10-minute walk access, equitable access, basic stuff. But a lot on here is about sustainability. We're talking resilient landscape, restoring waterways, mountain parks, fire mitigation management, which is a big deal now after what happened here pretty recently in Superior. Right-of-way trees, energy efficiency, converting our tools and mowers when we can to electric, reducing our greenhouse emissions off the board. The one of these I want to talk about, I'm happy to talk about any of these if anyone has any questions, but it's really the resilient landscapes and the trail system to coincide with the investment in electric vehicles and electric bikes. We want to make sure that our trail system is up to date and can accommodate and encourage people to use it. So we'll talk about that in future slides. Johnny? So when we talk about resiliency, really what we're talking about at the end of the day is water. We are a semi-arid climate shifting towards the more arid. Has anyone seen the snowpack recently? This is becoming an increasingly important issue to the point of complete dedication from our side to reducing our water usage. As Denver Water's biggest customer, any transformation we can make on stuff that's can't be seen by the public and is not really something that we can build posters on, but irrigation replacements, water conservation systems across the board, more efficient pumps, central controllers, computer-controlled irrigation systems allows us to instill in a lot of water savings in the hundreds of millions of gallons a year, which can all be either put back in the Platte like it should be and sent to Nebraska, but also is saved for families here, that water that's not having to be reused through irrigation purposes. The other big part of this is landscape conservation. So there is an idea that people have in their mind about what a park looks like, and that's called the King's Garden, and it's based on England. And we have in the United States replicated that model across the country. So we have bluegrass in places where bluegrass doesn't grow. We have bluegrass parks and golf courses in Arizona, and to the point where it's becoming increasingly hard to do that with our water supply issues. So part of what we're trying to do is convert the system back to upland prairie. Obviously, some places still need bluegrass, athletic fields, things like that. Where possible, we want to convert everything back to our native environment. These, we'll get into it on future slides, but these are across the board, more resilient, better for insect life, pollinators, use way less water, are way easier to maintain, but they do conflict with people's idea of what an urban park should look like. So part of our job is helping to market that transition to everyone and explain that this is important, and it's almost inevitable that we are going to be going back to a mostly native system. And the benefits, I think it's beautiful, and for me personally, it's preferable. But we have a lot of people who disagree, and so we have to try to change some hearts and minds on that front, because at some point we won't have a choice, really. And so we're trying to be as proactive as possible before we hit that time. Next slide. So this is just a little bit of the resilient projects that have gone on over the last 3 years. We have 375 acres that have been converted back to native landscape. We have $100 million worth of partnership funds that we've been used to do this. This is an incredibly expensive proposition, but over the long run, it's worth every penny because it cuts down massively on our maintenance and our water usage, and ultimately makes us better stewards of the green spaces that we have in the future. Next slide. So this is kind of a breakdown of where we are and where we're trying to go. So on the traditional park side, you see kind of the traditional park landscapes. You've got traditional park space, which is human trafficked. It's got playground equipment, walks, things like that. You've got bluegrass lawn, which supports that. And then the bluegrass forested area. This is what you think of as a traditional urban park. What we're trying to go to is use more upland and riparian areas in the places where they're appropriate, and really encourage people to also get up to the upland forest, which Denver Parks and Recreation, if you don't know, has 14,000 acres of mountain parks, and they're not even in the county. So back in the kind of turn of the century, when Denver was kind of like Washington, D.C., it wasn't a municipality. It was actually owned by the state government, bought a whole bunch of land up in the mountains and dedicated it to park use. And when Denver became a city and inherited it all. And so Winter Park is actually built on municipal property. Ucko Lake, Summit Lake, Genesee, those are Red Rocks, are all actually Denver municipal property, even if they're not in the county of Denver. So part of what we're doing is trying to get people, encourage people up to those areas to experience those natural places. And a big part of our conservation effort is actually protecting our watershed. So us keeping that land undeveloped helps on water quality, helps retain moisture in the mountains, which ultimately ends down in our water supply. Next slide, Johnny. So, landscape typography is a big part of this analysis. And so what we're doing is we go through a volume on a 4-year annual basis, and we analyze what our landscapes are at a percentage of the system. And then where are they poor, good, fair condition? And then when we notice these poor declining areas, these are great areas for us to do some conversion. But also where the native landscapes are failing, it allows us to come back and really analyze the mistakes that were made either from irrigation or non-traditional use, or maybe it was the wrong plant types, and really learn from them and come back and reconvert those areas. And then an increasingly big part of this process is where to plant trees. So trees, and unless they're in the riparian zone in Denver, are not native. We do not grow trees in the upland prairie. If you go anywhere outside the city, you will notice how few trees there are. So all of the trees are kind of living outside of their natural environments, and as the climate gets drier and hotter, it's increasingly difficult for us to keep those trees alive. So part of the landscape topography is figuring out what trees are successful in the claiming in the new environment, and what can we do to the surrounding land to ensure that those trees have a better chance of survival. Next slide, Johnny. So here is kind of what we talked about, the cost savings. I don't like to get too much into the money on this because we get a really good rate on water. It's really not about the dollars. It's about the gallons saved. So if we look at general recreation blue gas, we're talking about 16 gallons per year per square foot. And that is a ton of water, and that is to keep that alive. If we look at irrigated native grass, it's 5. So not only is it cheaper, it also uses, significantly less water. It's significantly better for bug life. And it doesn't make nearly as much fertilizer, which also has a greenhouse gas impact. So really, where we can, we are trying to shift everything to the irrigated non-native grasses, because the water impact is massive. And we have a case study to show on the next slide. So this is Parkfield Lake. This was a traditional bluegrass park, 56 irrigated bluegrass acres. Just flat and green as far as the eye could see. A non-restored shoreline around the lake, which also not only degrades wildlife habitat, doesn't provide any water quality service. It also just looks bad, quite frankly. So we went back, if you could go to the next slide, Johnny. Restored the shoreline back to its riparian native, converted everything in brown back to native prairie top, and we saved 20 million gallons a year of water. So if you can see kind of the impacts, we kept the general use areas as bluegrass because bluegrass is better for sports and laying out and picnicking. But in areas where it's almost purely aesthetic, we are trying to make that conversion back to the native upland prairie. And not only is this a massive saving of water, it is incredibly easy to maintain. So that's less man hours, less mowing, which requires equipment, which right now runs on diesel. So across the board, these native conversions from an environmental standpoint have been very successful. So the next big part of what I want to talk about today is the trail program. It's because this supports the the climate change office's initiatives on the vehicles on the e-bike service. We are trying to upgrade all of our trail systems to increase not only use, but kind of encourage new users. And as much as we love our partners at the Department of Transportation Infrastructure with all the bike lanes that have been built in the city, riding a bike on a bike lane can be scary, and it prevents people from trying it out because you've got traffic and big cars very close to you. So part of our initiative is to really upgrade these systems and expand them as far as we can across the city to give bike users and non-vehicle, either pedestrians or users, their own space. We have speed limits, we have lighting, we have some control over use, but generally it's supposed to be a pleasant experience to try to get more people to use these commutes. The other thing we're looking at is not to get rid of stops. Where we can, get underpasses so if you're driving, riding your bike 10 miles, you're not stopping at every intersection, crossing traffic, getting back on your bike. And obviously, in a large part of the work along the river where the trails preside is a lot of native restoration as well. Next slide. So this is kind of an overview of the trail system. It's very extensive, 90+ miles. The dark red is where we're focusing right now. The vision is to make these kind of, bike and e-vehicle highways, reduce the amount of stops, build underpasses, and then while we're there, also restore those riverbanks to make not only increase water quality, but make it a more pleasant experience. To be pinned against a retaining wall and a 2-to-1 bank right into the river. Next slide. So this is kind of our new standard for these trails. So what we want to do is we want to give a safe place for runners that if they're not feeling pressured from behind by bikes, and that's the 4 foot of crusher fine that will sit along the side of the trail. We also want to make a 12-foot wide trail, which allows 2 lanes of bike traffic, 1 in each direction, as well as enough room for 2 people to walk next to each other who don't want to use the traditional, the crusher fine trail. And we also want 3 feet of vegetation offset. This allows us to remove that feeling of being pinned in, which we think makes it a little bit more of a pleasant experience. Now, this is difficult in some of the areas that are close to the highway. But as we work to reslope the riverbanks into the river, it's back to their normal and traditional slopes. This is actually incredibly easy to do once that's happened, and we can get into a little bit more detail on that later. Next slide. So the trail asset inventory. Most of the system's mileage has been built out, but the quality of some of the system is pretty bad. A lot of the original sections were built in the 70s. And the city has changed a lot then, use has changed, freeways have been widened. And so we're coming back and we do a trail assessment every other year where we actually ride with a machine that kind of detects irregularities in the trail system, but also just allows us to visually assess the quality. We put that back in the GIS system, and that lets us focus on where we need to focus our investment to try to get these things back up to a quality where people feel safe using them. Next slide, John. Oh, I have them there twice, sorry. So I want to do an example project, just kind of show you the extensive work that comes with building trails. It's an incredibly rewarding experience, but it's sometimes, especially along riverways, it's incredibly complicated. So this is a section of Curry Creek. As you can see, this was primarily rerouted back in the 60s for flood control. That's back when the Corps and everyone, that's what they were worried about was flood control. So it's got a deep channel, a very inhospitable bank. There's a lot of non-traditional erosion along the sides because it was channeled. And it was done this to increase water flow, which helps with flooding during flooding events. The downside of this is it destroys the environment, the ecological value of these properties, because that fast water makes it difficult for riparian to grow. It also makes the banks incredibly unstable. And then you get those kind of cliff drop-offs into the water, which are hard to build on, not particularly stable, and not really an ecological habitat for fish and birds. Next slide, Johnny. So what we're trying to do is we're doing a mile. Well, we have already done it, but it's a mile length. It'll create 18 more acres of parkland. It'll reduce a lot of the erosion. It'll repair a lot of degraded habitat. It'll get rid of a lot of those steep drop-offs and makes the trails a lot stabler. And it'll actually increase connectivity to the water. So right now it's very limited with those steep embankments. And as we regrade these sites, and we have some drone footage to show you what that looks like, and it allows people to get near the water. And that's part of experiencing how, not only is it good for water quality, it's allowing people to use it for recreational purposes. And it hopefully encourages better stewardship when people get to see the benefits of really taking environmental sustainability seriously. Next slide. So part of the project is also increased river work, actually getting into the river, creating artificial boulders as well as real boulders to increase water turbulence. This does a lot for oxygenation. It reduces E. coli growth. A lot of the other issues that come with actually routing the river originally out of its natural path. And so while we can't, because of development, can't go and truly reroute it, we can do with artificial means kind of recreate some of the processes that nature used to do by itself in the urban environment. Next slide, Johnny. And that's really just more of the same, but it's a pretty interesting picture watching all of that get poured down. Let's go to the next one. So really, this is what it looks like after it's all regraded. As you can notice, a lot of it is now a gradual embankment into the river, which is much easier to vegetate, slows the water flow down, hydrologically is way more sustainable, and way better for fish and wildlife habitats. This is kind of what it looks like now. We're actually starting to seed. We're trying to seed and do the native establishments. Some of it started last fall, and then it'll continue throughout the year. And then the shrubs and the bigger trees will be planted all the way into 2023. We need good undergrowth before we can start a lot of the bigger vegetation granting. Yep, next slide. So this is another spot of what it looks like now. Obviously, you can see the new outfall near Quebec, and then all the regrading makes it a much more, I think, pleasant viewing experience. And then once that's all green again, that's going to be a completely different view shed and recreational opportunity along that creek. And you can see the trail now, which is now farther away from the street and nearer to that vegetated area. So once that's all grown back, that'll be sorry, I lost my train of thought. But anyway, that's what we're trying to go for, is this more separated, dedicated commuting lane for people who do not take motorized vehicles. And there's just more pictures of kind of what the construction looks like. Next one, and that's it. That's it for me. So interested to see if anyone has any questions about parks or anything that we're doing outside of this, or wants any more details on how any of this works and how it affects our system.
That was awesome. Really, so much fun talking about all this stuff. And I mean, even though I work for the city, I love seeing what other agencies are doing and the work that Parks is doing. So thanks so much for sharing, Colton.
Mm-hmm.
Pull up questions here. But Theron, so you got a hand up, and there you go.
Hey, Johnny, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hey, Colton, thanks for this. This is awesome. Appreciate what you guys are doing. And Johnny, nice job on those rebates. It's going to be an incredible day tomorrow. I hope you get a big outpouring of people applying first day out. I think it's been a big buzz in the media all week. I have a question about the pool heating and whether or not you've looked at solar thermal as a solution. Here at CRES, we've done several sessions on solar thermal from different people, different installers. I even put a link to a publication that CRES did back in 2012 of some solar thermal out at the Fed building and a couple other locations too. But it might be a good solution with the high efficiency of the heating water.
Yeah, I know it's one of the solutions on the table. It's one of the ones that we're working through right now with our engineers. There's some geothermal heat pump solutions. There's hybrid systems where it's like half and half because not so much the outdoor pools, but the indoor pools in the winter when we get cold water from the system, from like the tap, it's just a lot of BTUs to heat it, but that is definitely a solution on the table, so I appreciate the suggestion.
Great. Thank you, Theron. And my assumption is it's going to take us, a combination of technologies to achieve the outcomes that we need. Other questions from the group? Feel free to raise your hand, or I'll start tapping into some of the written questions that we received.
Let's see, I got one here. When will we be able to ride Sand Creek Trail from the Platte all the way east to Iowa Canal? This is a fair question. Sand Creek Trail, we are actually finishing the last build out this summer, and there will be a ribbon cutting. There's still some crossing issues along that system, but it is like very high on our list. It's difficult because, well, there's a lot of issues there, but part of the issue we've had with Sand Creek is the historical degradation of the environment. There's a lot of soil issues with heavy metal contamination, things like that. So when we do go in development of along Sand Creek especially, we're doing a lot of remediation as well, which slows things down. So is there a section particularly that you're concerned about?
Yeah, no, thank you for the information. Yeah, I'm just an enthusiastic rider. And yeah, sometimes I just need a little extra benzene on my bicycle ride, so I ride through there. But yes, just looking for more long routes, and you're right, because I saw it on your map. That'll be a wonderful connector for people who are trying to get, ride further distances, in particular trying to get downtown, because there's no good east-west, from the east side of town. So anyway, thank you so much for that. I basically just wanted to express enthusiasm. Thank you all for doing that. Please keep doing that. And hooray, hooray.
Yeah, and we really love the trail system. It's, until our sales tax negative passed in 2018, which was also a 0.25%, similar to CASR's, we just didn't have the budget. Trails, especially along waterways, if we do them correctly, are incredibly expensive. And so it's been a very slow build out, but now with our additional financial resources, we're able to be a lot more diligent. And then good news for us too is the infrastructure bills, which are coming out of the federal government now, finally include multimodal transportation as like a high priority.
Yay.
So we're looking at grant opportunities to get real funding. We actually just got a TIP grant, which is a traditional transportation grant to do some bringing up this standard, some of the lengths along the South Platte River. And that's a $10 million grant, which allows us to do significant mileage. So it's a real focus area of ours to coincide with all of the alternative transportation initiatives the city is doing. The other thing that's a little bit of a challenge, full transparency, is road crossings. Underpasses and overpasses are insanely expensive, especially if the bridge wasn't really built thinking about doing that, because then you have to go in and either replace the bridge, the road bridge, or reinforce the bridge, and that can also be really complicated and really expensive. The other thing is retaining walls are also difficult. So yeah, there has been some leftover parcels that people just walked away from back in the day because they were too expensive, that forced bikes back onto the road or didn't provide a clear path along waterways, and we're trying to rectify that now that we have kind of by better financial ability to do so.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Right. I'll take one from the question pool here. How did you get permission and funding to approve these rebates? Was the decision determined to be a debate, voting, or environmental policy? So, nothing in the city gets done without extensive conversation and engagement and really thinking through our options. We're fortunate in the Climate Office to have a Sustainability Advisory Council and 6 different subcommittees that help act as a sounding board and as a source of ideas for our office and where we can make the biggest impact. So we've been talking about the rebate program with them for months, and how does it fit in with some of our other priorities, and how do we make sure it advances both our decarbonization and equity goals. Additionally, the program had to go through City Council to have them review the program and authorize and approve the funding for it. So there's a number of different checks throughout the process, and we try to talk about things regularly with community members, with all of the different stakeholders who might be affected by what we do. And I always encourage you, feel free to reach out. You can go to our website, you can find my contact information, jonathan.rogers@denvergov.org, and we're always open to having conversations. This one for you, Colton. Could parks appropriate streets from Dottie and turn them into trails? It'd be great to give up some streets in exchange for better trail connections to downtown.
Yeah, so if any of you have been lucky enough to go to Vancouver, they do this a lot there. It's pretty cool. There's some sections of Vancouver that are every other street is like either you live on that street and you park there, or it's bike only. It's completely closed to through traffic. We haven't really explored that option with them, quite frankly. I mean, I personally would love it, but that's a larger city decision, because that would force vehicles back onto already roads. And if you've been anywhere near the city core now, traffic is already really bad. We theoretically could do it. They're actually looking at doing it at Bannock Street in front of the, they're going to close and vacate Bannock Street in front of the city hall, and then turn that into more of a festival gathering space to support civic gatherings and things like that. So it isn't unprecedented. It isn't something that we theoretically could, but it would require city council approval. Dottie might hunt me down in the night. So I don't, it's definitely, it's a city urban planning decision almost exclusively. Yeah.
And Colton, I'm sorry, I'm jumping in here. The 5280 trail is going to be in that direction, not quite taking it all away from the vehicles, but turning it into more of a European model of what a shared street looks like, which we're not used to seeing. So it's in that direction, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, the 5280 trail is a good example of probably a hybrid model, not a complete street seizure. And we're actually looking along to put some, potentially acquire some parcels along the trail to also put up some small parks as well. So as that plan develops out, it is a good kind of idea on how the future could look, because those European those mixed use streets are, man, they're a lot more efficient as far as getting bodies mobile across, very small area without having big steel boxes around you all the time. But it's also going to be a big change and a very expensive infrastructure seizure. So we gotta make sure that, we're being very diligent on how we engage in those kind of things.
Well, let's do probably 2 or 3 more questions and then wrap up here. So here's one from Greg. Curious about what makes the bigger impact, prioritizing water usage or natural gas usage? Wants to eventually upgrade both, but which one should you do first if you can't do it at the same time? Switching to a heat pump or replacing Kentucky bluegrass? I actually don't know the answer to this, but I'm curious, Colton, what do you see as the impact of homeowners and tearing out their bluegrass? What kind of an impact do you think that can make around the city?
So I actually am a little biased on this front, and some more history about me. Like when I finished my environmental science degree at the University of Houston, I actually cleaned up oil spills for the first 4 years of my professional career, which was an insane experience. And And then I actually was the air pollution enforcement and regulatory manager for DFW in Texas, which meant all heavy industry all the way down to the smallest body shop. So what I actually say is like, it's natural gas usage. Because our water problems are so heavily connected to climate change, you have to fix the source. And like, if we save a bunch of water now and don't do anything about climate change, it's just going to get worse and it's not going to matter. So obviously they're both important, but one is almost more reactionary to the core issue, which is that our snowpack is dwindling. And until that stops happening, you know, I think it keeps heading in that direction. You could save all the water you want until there's none left, and then it doesn't matter. So I really think that if you did have a choice, as far as a homeowner goes, a bigger impact is getting your heat pump and your energy system, you know, as green as possible, because the big water users, us, can have a lot more impact on that. And it's kind of a reaction to an existing problem, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and great making that, you know, connection back to the addressing the root cause. And yeah, another nudge for you, Greg, is, you know, those $9,000 heat pump rebates aren't going to be there forever, so you might want to move quickly on that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's see, one more. Anyone want to raise a hand and ask a question verbally, so I'm not just talking at you? And that can be our, you know, last one to wrap it up. No, maybe not. Not seeing a hand raise. Let's see if we got anything else in here. Carbon dioxide removal from Ron Larson. You know, thinking about, you know, all of our work and carbon sequestration, and, you know, how are we mitigating the carbon problem? I know from the climate office, you know, we're not doing any direct air capture or anything like that. You know, we're thinking about heat pumps and solar production and things, but for parks, you know, using biochar and some of these ideas of natural landscapes as a carbon sink. Curious, Colton, kind of what are you guys doing there? Maybe something to respond to Ron's question.
Yeah, as far as carbon capture goes, again, native landscapes produce, not only do they not require a lot of carbon to maintain, they absorb a lot more carbon than bluegrass does. Obviously, you know, it's pretty marginal in the grand scheme of things, but every little bit matters. The other big part in that is the urban tree canopy. Trees are also really good at carbon capture. But being quite frankly, like, you know, being frank about it, you know, the real efforts that the climate change office are making are gonna make a lot difference than anything the vegetative matter can capture. It's really about reducing fossil fuel use, because plants just can't do all the work. And so wind is a big part of why we promote tree growth and urban landscape conversions, and also riverbanks as well. Those native plants along riparian, in the riparian areas, are also another good carbon sink, but it's not nearly enough. So we can kind of pat ourselves on the back a little bit, but, you know, moving towards net zero, we know as the Parks Department is going to keep those native areas healthy and happy way longer than us, you know, vesting over them a lot.
Yeah, it's a really important partnership. You know, we did some of the math on our solar projects, those carports that we're hosting in parks. Now, the amount of electricity we're producing and then displacing carbon from the grid would be the equivalent of planting about 600,000 urban trees. So like, that just gives you a sense of how carbon intensive our energy systems are right now, and we need to be moving towards those cleaner solutions, because then that cycles back and helps to protect these native landscapes and our water supply, and, you know, all of this stuff that is just so connected that we've been talking about. So with that, I think, you know, it's been a awesome discussion with everybody. Colton, again, appreciate you coming out tonight and talking with us, and just, you know, happy to share with everybody all of the things that we're working on together, and as a city, just generally trying to move forward and in a sustainable, equitable way.
Well, thank you so much, Johnny. Thank you so much, Colton. I know that I learned a lot, and I'm super motivated and encouraged by the wonderful work you guys are doing together and individually through your organization. So please keep it up. And thanks for attending, everybody else, all of our CRES members. It was great to see you here tonight, and thanks for the engagement and all of the questions. We hope that you will come back and join us on Thursday, May 19th to hear more about protecting our winters and seeing what the ski industry has in store from a policy and advocacy and education side to try to keep that snowpack high. It's all related. So again, thanks all for joining tonight. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening and a very, very happy Earth Day tomorrow. Take care.